Mike's at a settlement conference today.
Oh, okay.
Announced that he's always city business.
Okay, got it. Thanks. We're good to go. It's on.
You don't need a column. You're just ready.
Good morning. I'll call to order this meeting of the Elections and Rules Committee. The date is January 22nd, 2014, which coincidentally is also Councilmember Glidden's birthday. And I'm Jacob Fry, the chair of this committee. With me are Council members Gordon, Cano, Bender, Glidden, Johnson, Belong, Warsami, Goodman. It's my understanding that Councilmember Reich is away on city business, and Councilmember Palmisano. Colleagues, we just have one very simple, hopefully brief item on the agenda for today, and that pertains to proposed revision of our council rules to reflect the new operating structure that we put into place on January 6th. Copies of the proposed the revisions have already been distributed, and with us here today is our clerk, Casey Carl, to hopefully give us the rundown.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. May it please the committee. As you mentioned, I'm here to present the draft 2014 revision of the Council's Rules of Order. As you mentioned, Mr. Chair, the rules were previously sent around to all council members. They were primarily revised to reflect the new organizational structure, which was unanimously adopted by the City Council as part of its organizational meeting this year. Those revisions are primarily reflected in Rules 4 and 5, which are on pages 5 through 7 of the draft before you. Again, the revisions focus on the new committee structure approved by Council. In Rule 4, a new Section 1 has been added that provides a fuller description about the purpose and duties of the committee structure. The Council's committee structure isn't really reflected in other governing documents. They are established by resolution, but their purpose and their function are captured in the rules. So this new section attempts to provide some background on the overall function of the committees. In addition, the term committee has been defined as encompassing standing and special committees, as well as any subcommittees, work groups, or other bodies that are created by the City Council. And language was added in Sections 3 and 4 to indicate that all of these bodies would be subject to the Council's rules. Further elaboration about the function of standing committees is provided in Section 2. That new language indicates that standing committees are responsible for providing direction, setting priorities, and ensuring coordination between related policies, programs, and services within their assigned jurisdictions. Standing committees also provide forums for public participation in city decision-making processes, and they monitor the implementation and effectiveness of policy and program decisions by the city's departments and divisions. And again, because these details about committees aren't included in other governing documents, this year's revision gave us an opportunity to expand on those details about the committee structure. At the conclusion of Section 2, again under Rule 4, we've included an updated listing of the Council's standing committees, which shows that the committees that were established this year by name, by total membership, by chair, and by quorum. A new section numbered 4 was added on page 6, which addresses subcommittees, and it specifically identifies the 2 standing subcommittees which were created by Council this year as part of the new committee structure. And finally, on page 7, under Rule 5, which addresses the committee of the whole, we've clarified in Section 1, paragraph C, the scope of that committee's authority and jurisdiction. Paragraphs or subparagraphs 4 and 5 have been consolidated with the existing subparagraph 2. These 3 components were all very closely related, and it made a stronger statement about the committee's oversight and jurisdiction when combined. The revised subparagraph 2 now indicates that the Committee of the Whole has jurisdiction over major enterprise-wide initiatives, programs, and projects that do not fit easily within the jurisdiction of one of the other standing committees, or which are not logically suited to the jurisdiction of another standing committee and would benefit from having the input and consideration of all council members. With the change in the Council's schedule, another important improvement in this year's organization is the fact that actions and recommendations by the Committee of the Whole will be submitted and taken up by the full Council within the same cycle. Previously, matters that were acted upon by the Committee of the Whole were required to lay over for one full cycle before being submitted to the City Council. By adjusting the Council's schedule, we were able to eliminate rules referencing this automatic layover and also streamline the process in order to expedite consideration of business within a single cycle. Section 2 of this rule has been deleted because the Intergovernmental Relations Committee is no longer subordinate to the Committee of the Whole. It is its own standing committee. That completes my summary of the rules revision, Mr. Chair. Resolution has been drafted to approve the 2014 rules revision and designated as the official rules of the City Council. I'm happy to stand for questions.
Any questions for the staff? Seeing no further questions, do we have... Oh, okay. Yes, Councilmember Yang?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a quick question. With regards to Chapter 4, Section 2, the part that's been striked is, in no case shall a council member serve simultaneously on the Standing Committee of CD and Standing Committee of Ways and Means. And I just wanted to ask me, what was the intent of that when we adopted that rule in the first place to not allow for a council member to serve on both?
I'd like to actually call on Councilmember Lisa Goodman.
Mr. Carl, Chair Fry. So I had the opportunity last night to give a call to a council member who was on the council at that time, and this is the explanation that they provided me. In the old days, there were lots of 7-6 votes. The council was very divided. In fact, it was divided from a partisan point of view. And so to make sure that there wasn't one group appointing their people to all of the key money committees, they put in a rule that would help spread out the work. In that time, the MCDA and the Community Development Committee had tons of money. In fact, that committee had tons of money 12 years ago. It kind of changed after the decline in the market and the Hilton Fund was eliminated. And so it was considered a money committee. This day and age, probably Transportation and Public Works would be considered the bigger money committee. And then maybe next Public Safety. Community Development as a budget is really small compared to some of these other larger committees. So it was put into place based on the time they were at, which was more divisive group of people and two committees that seemed to control most of the money. I would probably ask others to comment on that issue, but now the Community Development Committee has no more money, in fact, less than some of the other standing committees, if that was a concern. So I just wanted to clarify it because I heard last night that no one raised it to me, but that the question had been raised.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Would the city clerk care to further elaborate? Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you. I actually had a question about Section 4 with our new subcommittees. It's Councilmember. That's okay.
Go ahead,
Yang.
Councilmember Gordon, and then we'll get back to Councilmember Yang.
Wait, if he has the floor, he can continue.
Go ahead, Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I may, Councilmember Goodman, could you give us the rough approximation of when that was? Was it like 1970?
It's
or?
like 30 years ago.
Okay.
Or
Okay.
somewhere in that range. But Mr. Carl probably could be more specific.
Through the chair, Councilmember Yang, I can't be more specific, but I can tell you that last year when we did the revision of the 2013 rules, I spent a great deal of time with my staff researching the council's rules. And for the last many years, several decades, the rules were not compiled and adopted by resolution, which is one of the improvements we made last year so that we can better track. As the council made individual rules changes, they just directed the clerk to update the rules. So the latest rule was appended to the bottom of the rules. And it was sometimes difficult to find the history of why certain provisions were adopted and put in place.
Anything further, Councilmember Yang? Councilmember Gordon?
Thank you. I have a couple questions about the subcommittees. The first one might, I'm considering that we might need an amendment to the Section 4B on the Information Technology Policy Subcommittee. I noticed that with all the other committees and also with the Budget Subcommittee, we expressly mentioned the number needed for quorum. It has a sentence in there that says 7 council members shall constitute a quorum of the Budget Subcommittee. I'm assuming that's what also the IT Subcommittee would have, but it isn't expressly put in there. And my thought was maybe if we're making it really clear with every other standing committee and subcommittee, although it should maybe go in there as well. And then my other question more had to do with the functioning of the subcommittees. Reading the description of the budget subcommittee, it looks like, at least in terms of the mayor's proposed budget, that anything that the subcommittee approves would not go to the Ways and Means Committee for approval, but it would be put by the subcommittee into the final form for recommendation and sent to the City Council. And that made me wonder about the IT subcommittee, if that committee then would report and send its recommendations back through committee of the whole or not. Because the opening also says that the subcommittees are only established under the oversight of a standing committee. So I don't know that we have to rewrite any of those rules there, but it might be nice to hear what we're expecting to happen with the work of those subcommittees, especially if I'm misinterpreting the budget subcommittee, the fact that its recommendations about the mayor's budget wouldn't have to go back to the Ways and Means Committee.
Mr. Carl?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, and I'm sure others can speak to this as well. I'll take a first stab. The intent with these the Budget Subcommittee and Information Technology Policy Subcommittee were that much like the Intergovernmental Relations Committee served as a subcommittee within the Committee of the Whole in the previous term and was able to submit its recommendations directly to Council, that's how these subcommittees would act. So your identification of 7 council members serving as a quorum can certainly be duplicated in subsection B, and I can do that. The concept behind the budget subcommittee was that all 13 members as the subcommittee would take action throughout the entire budget process, rather than just the Ways and Means members being able to serve on that process, and then all council members waiting until the night of the final vote to bring forward any amendments or changes. So it would allow all 13 members of council to participate actively from the beginning of the budget process when the mayor submits it to council through till final adoption. Likewise, with the IT Policy Subcommittee serving as a standing subcommittee within the Committee of the Whole, it would meet concurrently with the Committee of the Whole when there are items to discuss. It would take action. Those recommendations would go forward straight to council.
Okay, I appreciate that. I think it will change the budget process a little bit for us and maybe make it easier and actually empower more of us who aren't on Ways and Means, so I appreciate that. It seems less likely now that we'd have a lot of amendments at that final meeting because those amendments could be brought forward earlier.
I think that was one of the goals in developing the budget subcommittee.
Well, I do think that when it's appropriate, I would like to amend just to insert the sentence, 7 council members shall constitute a quorum of the Information Technology Policy Subcommittee, probably the second to the last sentence of section B, just so it's consistent with everything else. Thank you. No other questions right now.
So, Councilman, I believe there's a motion on the floor to amend. This is section 2B, I believe. Section B, so that 7 members constitute a quorum in the IT committee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We have amended that particular section. Do we, council member?
It was actually section 4, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, section 4. Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Councilmember Gordon, do you have anything further?
No, thank you very much.
Councilmember Cano?
Mr. Clerk, so I'm a little hesitant to approve this change, and I guess I need more context for this. Is this a specific motion being presented by your department? Procedurally, I'm trying to understand where this is coming from.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cano, when the council acted during its organizational meeting via resolution, both to establish its standing committee structure and to adopt its rules, there were provisions that directed the city clerk to go amend the rules to match your action so that the rules now match the decisions you made. So this is an administrative act by the clerk coming back as directed to council saying, here are your amended rules as you directed me to do.
Do you foresee any legal problems or risks in making this change?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Cano, no.
Okay, thank you.
If I may add, Mr. Carl, I actually see legal issues if we continue under the present unrevised rules, because we would then be opening ourselves up to ethics complaints as having a member that's openly violating the present rules. Anything further, Ms. Cano? Councilmember Glidden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a couple of comments. First, that when we did vote at our organizational meeting, this was a directive to the city clerk to bring forward the changes that would reflect what we already voted on. So just to kind of refresh folks on that, this is really just an action to confirm what we voted on at the organizational meeting. The second thing I wanted to say, though, is, and I appreciate the history that Councilmember Goodman brought. I guess I hadn't understood all of the issues in there. I will say that the rules, at least in my experience, is something that has not been regularly reviewed and updated. And I think there was an update last term towards the very end of the term. And so in some ways, I think we have some pieces in the rules that might reflect some historical ways that we looked at the council, but I'll just mention maybe a few other things that some of them are not necessarily in the rules, but I think have become ways that we're operating that are ways that, there is not, say, power concentrated, if that's kind of the interest in maybe one or two committees. One is that both the president and the vice president have agreed not to chair any of these major money committees. And so you don't see, which used to happen, that the president might chair the Ways and Means Committee or chair the CD Committee or chair the Transportation and Public Works Committee, and that's been a practice that we've adopted in recent times that has been continued, that we're not taking those chairing positions as the president and the vice president to spread out those responsibilities more. Another thing which I think Councilmember Goodman brought up is that how we perceive some of these committees, I would just suggest we might want to relook at, because the Transportation Public Works Committee, as someone who served on this council for 8 years, that's where the money is. That is a major policy committee, and it's a major committee where funding decisions are made routinely. And so I think there's some perceptions that have built up over time that I don't know if they are completely reflected in the reality of how the work is divided out. And then the last thing I'll say is I want to thank my colleagues for supporting what I think was one of the most important changes in these rules, which is that we have now opened up the budget process so that every single council member can participate fully in that process. So the way things used to work prior to this term was that only members of the Ways and Means Committee could make motions to amend the budget prior to the actual night of adoption, which means that if you are not on the Ways and Means Committee and you didn't find someone to agree with whatever you wanted to propose, you're waiting until about 8 or 9 o'clock at night when we're adopting the budget to be making a motion and having debate on that motion, and frankly causing a lot of havoc in how we go through our budget process. This amendment, I would just suggest to Councilmember Gordon, is not really a small change. It's a big change because the budget process will be more transparent. 13 council members can participate fully in that process, and participating not just in sitting in on the hearings, but actually making motions at the appropriate time to amend the budget. So, and then you need the support of 7 council members clearly to make those changes and move it forward. So those are just my comments.
Thank you, Councilmember Glidden. Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank Councilmember Goodman for some history on this and being able to reach out and understand because, like some others, I was surprised to see the change where we were removing that rule that prevented a council member from sitting both on community development and Ways and Means. I know certainly in discussing potential committee assignments, that was one thing that was made clear to myself and I believe to others as well, is that you could not be on both of those committees. And I also understand too that the council structure, the committee structure has changed, and perhaps we should be having a discussion at some point about why this rule was put in place, and if perhaps some semblance of this rule should still be in place, whether that's that you can't serve on maybe CD and Transportation and Public Works at the same time. And I don't know what that potential would be. Maybe we don't have this rule at all, and that may be perfectly well and fine. But I think it's important to have that discussion and that conversation. Certainly when you have a rule that's been in place for, from what we can tell, 30 plus years, it seems to be important that we are judicious with changing such a rule, and that we fully consider the consequences of it, and not just within this particular term, but moving forward as well. So I appreciate my colleagues who have also had interest in understanding this rule more specifically in its history and context. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson. Are there any further questions for Casey Carl? Seeing no further questions and seeing no further comments, I would like to, the question before us is on the adoption of the 2014 revised rules of order. Are you ready for the question? Now move to adopt the revised rules of order with Councilmember Gordon's amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The ayes have it, and the 2014 revised rules of order have been adopted. That item will be forwarded for final consideration by the city clerk at its regular meeting tomorrow. In addition to the work on council rules this morning as a committee, we also have a relationship with the Ethics Practices Board. Under our Code of Ethics, all elected and appointed officials and all employees are required to complete the mandatory ethics training for elected officials. That training must be completed within 6 months of taking office. Working with staff, we've identified a potential date for this training for all council members. I'm proposing to add that training to the council's calendar 2 weeks from today on Thursday, February 6th, following the regular scheduled meeting of the Committee of the Whole. It was our hope that we could provide that training to as many council members as possible. However, if any council member is unable to participate in that training, staff can certainly arrange a one-on-one meeting. If there are no further objections, I will direct staff to coordinate that training for us 2 weeks from today on Thursday, February 6th, following the Committee of the Whole meeting. Seeing no objections, I will make that recommendation. And seeing we have no further business or items to be presented, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.